Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 6 of Readings from Gift of the Shaper. I'm your host, DL Jennings. Thanks for joining us. So basically, we've been doing a series on Gift of the Shaper, and I've pretty much been reading the chapters and, attempting to do the voices. So I've also been doing, some commentary, basically like what inspired the characters and everything like that. So stick around after the video today, and I'll be doing basically a special kind of post video thing that I'm going to try out, see how it works. And so, other than that, we will get to Chapter 6. This is where we meet our new point of view character. His name is Dylus. So, in a faraway cell made of mortar and stone, Dylus, son of Jekko, awoke to the smell of rotting wood and a headache that made him question his sanity. Blinking his way back to consciousness, he tried with little success to identify his surroundings. He was in some sort of prison, that much he could see, with a great wooden door standing between him and freedom. He gave a few more glances around the room and rubbed his eyes. Like all Athrani, he was born with distinct, multicolored eyes that served as a means of setting him apart from regular humans and identifying him as one born with the gift of shaping. A treasure to their people, Athrani eyes had two colors, a first that made up the inner portion, and a second that replaced the white that existed in human eyes, making the eyes of the Athrani appear huge and unmistakable. It was no surprise, then, that eyes were such an important part of Athrani culture. The color of the outer portion, the ring, which always passed from father to son, had become a symbol of strength and nobility over the ages. Since a darker ring meant a stronger affinity for shaping, those who had them usually found themselves in positions of power, based solely on their perceived link to the other world. Dark eyes, fine lives, was a common phrase in Elenos. But to those who were born to an Athrani father and a human mother, their eyes were an inescapable curse that marked them for life. No matter how strong their affinity for the other world, and how dark their ring, it only appeared in one eye. The other eye was indistinguishable from a human eye, with no ring at all. These half-eyes were looked down on with pity and derision, and were sometimes ostracized completely. Whether by force or by choice, most of them sought new lives among humans. Some had even done so for generations. They were bastards, though, children of two worlds that would never be fully accepted in either. Rejected by humans and resented by Athrani, they carried the weight of their heritage on their backs and in their eyes. None knew this better than Dylus, whose sky-blue left eye floated on a pool of gold that brought him more than his fair share of poor treatment because of what he was, unquestionably different. And knowing that if the roles had been reversed, if his mother had been Athrani and his father human, he would show no sign of his heritage whatsoever. There was not a day that went by that he did not curse his Athrani father for falling in love with a human. As his wits slowly returned to him, he realized he had no knowledge of where he was or how he came to be there. His wrists were cold, and he discovered why once he glanced at them. Two thick irons, one on each wrist, were held together by three loops of a chain that allowed him almost no freedom of movement. About 3/4 of the way up the door was a horizontal window framed with iron. 3 vertical bars, each about the length of a hand, were evenly spaced in the portal, denying even the smallest hope of an exit, even though the gaps between the bars were barely large enough to put his head through. Heedlessly, he raised his hands and ran his fingers through his long white hair. He stopped when he felt something on his fingertips and pulled his hand away in confusion. Blood? He touched his scalp lightly and inhaled sharply at the pain. "Is someone there?" a voice whispered. He put his ear to the wall. "Who said that?" he asked. The voice that answered him was smooth and light. "My name is Adrian. Did they bring you in today?" I think so. I can't be sure. I don't remember much, and I seem to have suffered a blow to the head."
That's how they work, Adrian whispered. They sneak up on you, mostly at night, when no one else is around to see. Smack you over the head, then drag you here and chain you up. He added with a sigh, I know, because that's how I ended up in here.
Dylus leaned his head against the wall in defeat.
How long has it been?
There was a pause for calculation.
3 days ago, maybe 4. It's just been me up till now.
Both of them froze at the sound of footsteps, heavy and slow.
Just like the owner, I'd wager, Dylus thought with a chuckle.
He considered standing up to take a look outside, but thought better of it and stayed seated on the floor. If the guard was looking to drag out a body, he would rather pretend to be one than have it forced upon him. When they came to a stop, Dylus could make out the outline of a face through the opening in his door. There was barely enough light to see, but whoever it was, he saw what he was looking for. And the footsteps picked up again, moving away as heavily and slowly as they had come. When they stopped, there was a shout in the distance, coupled with the sounds of a struggle. Then there was a yell from a different, rougher voice, followed by the crack of wood on bone and the sound of a body hitting the ground. Dylus shrunk in his cell as he found himself frozen by the sounds. His eyes darted around as if willing his body to move, to hide, but his limbs stubbornly refused. His heart made it worse by thumping violently against his ribcage and sending blood screaming through his body. An audible gulp preceded the thought that whatever was making that noise would come for him next. His sweat glands seemed to be convinced that was the case. After some scuffling and harsh whispers, footsteps once again approached his cell door. He heard the heavy clank of iron as the lock to his door was unbolted.
In here,
came a high-pitched voice. This was followed up by the sound of something heavy being dragged and the door to his cell being flung open. Then the body of the biggest man he'd ever seen was dumped unceremoniously onto the floor beside him. After the door was slammed shut again, the only sounds were 2 pairs of footsteps and shallow breathing from the body beside him. Dylus waited for the footsteps to fade as he watched the man, his eyes wide in amusement.
What was that?
Adrian whispered from the next cell over, his voice punctuated with urgency.
My new cellmate, apparently, Dylus quipped.
By now his pulse had slowed, but the sweat on his palms and forehead remained. Looking over the stranger, Dylus was amazed that their captors had not seen it necessary to chain him up as well. For one, he was an absolute mountain of a man, even bigger than the guard who dragged him in. His clothes were torn and covered in blood, most likely a mix of his and a few others. And the calluses on his hands told the story of a man who relied on his strength alone to survive. His dark brown hair flowed into a thick beard.
It sounded like they hit him pretty good, came Adrian's voice again. Is he alive?
Seeing that he was breathing and not wanting to startle the man if he happened to wake up, Dylus voiced a curt yes and retreated to the far corner of the room. The large heap of a man was certainly alive, but not by much. After a pregnant silence, he turned again to the wall.
Do you know where we are? The best I can figure is somewhere outside the Talvin forest. I was headed from Elenos on my way back to Anarch when they grabbed me.
Elenos. Dylus latched onto the word.
Are you a Thrani?
There was hesitation before an answer.
I am, Adrian said. Through my father.
A half-eye? Asked Dylus.
All my life.
That makes 2 of us. Adrian's voice from the other cell sounded worried.
I don't like the sound of that. 2 Athrani held captive in the same place. I wonder if this new one is a Thrani as well.
Just then he heard footsteps approaching, this time quickly. Both men fell silent. From the cell to his right, Dylus heard the clank of a lock and the door opening. Time to go, said a deep voice, accompanied by the sound of chains moving around.
Go where?
Said Adrian. You Athrani and your questions, the man said with a touch of amusement. Dylas moved quietly to the window of his door and tried to peer through it to see what was happening. He placed his cheek against the wall and turned ever so slightly to get a better vantage point. He had to move all the way to the left of the hole to even see anything, but all he could manage was a glimpse of the outside of the open door to the cell on his right. Nevertheless, he watched and waited. Up with you, the voice barked. Decane won't like it if we're late. Chains scraped heavily against the stone floor. The door swung shut with a heavy clank, and Dylas saw their captor, a man in a black tunic, holding a chain leading to the neck, wrist, and legs of Adrian. The Athrani's long, light hair hung down past his shoulders, and his youthful face was streaked with fear and sadness. His right eye was lined with only the slightest of a gray ring. The man holding the chain, a brute of a man with scars covering his face, looked through the small window into Dylas' cell, causing the Athrani to recoil in fright and nearly stumble over the slumbering stranger beneath him. The man's teeth revealed themselves to be as crooked as his grin. Don't worry, he said through the rectangular opening in the heavy wooden door, his voice deep and mocking. You're next. As he walked away with Adrian, his laughter echoed down the halls and mixed with the horrific scraping of metal on stone. So that was chapter 6. We met Dylas and Adrian, two Athrani from the city of Elenos, and one mysterious newcomer who is apparently a mountain of a man with a giant brown beard and long brown hair. Who could it be?